Hi, my name is Nikki Blomstrand, and I'm going to be presenting today on my interview between myself and my colleague and friend Christina Leal. To start, I'll introduce myself. I am 33 years old. I am presently a mother of three and a wife to my husband of 8 years. 8 years. Been together for a little over 10. And we have three beautiful children, 7, 5, and 1. My oldest child is my son, Eric, who has Down syndrome and autism. And my 5-year-old is named Bo, and my 1-year-old is my daughter, Zoe. Growing up, I come from a 2-parent household, both of whom had to work my entire childhood. I would say that we would have classified as a lower middle class family. Our status was very much impacted and fluctuated due to my father struggling with alcoholism and having an inability to consistently maintain a job. He was in sales for most of my childhood, though there were really, really good years, and there were years where he was unemployed completely due to losing a job and not being able to find or sustain another one due to his struggles with addiction. My mother worked in the school system for my whole life as a para, and then eventually as a secretary, where she still works today. They still are both working well into their 60s and will have to do so for the foreseeable future. We, on paper looked like a pretty happy family. My parents are still married to this day, and we were all able to attend and graduate high school. However, my older brother struggles from some emotional and behavioral disorders, and his presence in our home certainly impacted the family dynamic, and especially myself being the one. Him and I are only 2 years apart. My younger brother is about 4 years younger than me. And so with us being so close in age, going to the same school, and quite honestly, a favoritism for him via my father. My father is very traditional in the sense that he feels that the man should be the man of the household, the man should be the provider, that the male values in strength and leadership, and he very much followed the belief that the firstborn son was to, take after him, follow in his footsteps, carry on the family name, all of those things. And so he did show favoritism towards my oldest brother, and my mother, I think I would say based on his high level of need, that she favored him as well, just because he naturally required more time and attention in order to complete things that I didn't necessarily need their help with, and I was able to be dependent in. So it was an interesting upbringing. Religion in my household was also a little bit of a tense subject. My father was Episcopalian, or is Episcopalian, and my mother is Catholic. And though they discussed that prior to marriage, it definitely caused some issues within our upbringing. I'm baptized Episcopalian, but I ended up attending a congregational church. My mother and father attended different churches growing up, actively during my childhood. So religion was always an interesting subject in my household, just because they were not entirely unified on their front and their beliefs. Yet they both practiced and still do to this day. So as for now, my children are raised somewhat without religion. It's definitely something that's talked about in our home, but they are not actively practicing in any religion. It is something that we feel that we are going to let them choose their own path on. My husband also had a little bit of a mixed, he comes from a blended family, and same kind of deal. His mother, stepmother, father were not all in alignment on religion, so he also was not brought up in one strong prominent faith. So we are just allowing our children to have an understanding of religion, but not necessarily predetermining what religion they will practice or follow, if any at all. Which kind of is my biggest segue into my interviewee. I had the pleasure of sitting down with my friend and colleague, Christina Leal. She is a 34-year-old Colombian woman who actually immigrated here from Colombia when she was in her late teens, and she is the only one here actually from her immediate family. So her mother, father, and little sister are still back in Colombia. She grew up in Buenaventura area, which is a poorer city along the coast of Colombia, and she has we discovered that we have very different, in full transparency, we have been friends, so I did already know some of this about her, but we did especially focus through the lens of education and upbringing, but we did have very, very different upbringing. So she actually is raised in a very Catholic household. She's still a devout practicing Catholic. It is something that is a pillar, she says, is a pillar in her community, not only within her household, but the larger population, and it's even religion is a required study in both public and private schools. So that is something that, is very different than being brought up in the United States, where currently we have a separation of church and state within our public schooling, and though we learn about religion in historical context and cultural context, we don't require it as a class, and it is not something that is inherently part of our school curriculum, whereas in Colombia, Christina says that is very, very much part of their curriculum. She states that no matter, they're in her area, there's several public schools, and then there's also, you do have the option to attend private school, and it didn't matter which route you went, that religion was going to be part of that. And in her household, it was absolutely at the forefront of their family values and very much influenced their culture and their beliefs, including something that we kind of talked about was that romantic relationships, like for example, for her mother and father, are taken very, very seriously. Commitment to each other, and adultery of any kind is very much a sin that is taken with extreme seriousness in her culture. And she said that while it pertains mainly to romantic relationships, she does feel that trickles into other aspects of her upbringing, including actually education, because she said that there's just a really important sense of loyalty within her community and within her upbringing. And she said even within the education system, you had a loyalty to your peers and your teachers, and so she feels that loyalty kind of carried into respect. So within her community, she said that the elders are respected, or any authority figure is very, very much respected. She did say that in school, what she's found very different in America is actually the way that students and kids will talk to their teachers and parents. She said is something that she could never imagine happening in Colombia. Even now, she has a much younger sister who is still in the school system there. She's in high school, and she said she could never dream of her sister speaking to adults the way that she witnesses children speak to adults in America. So that respect and that loyalty is something that she feels is something that stands out within our cultures. And I would have to agree, because working in the school systems now, you really do see that kids, I think it's gotten even more extreme from when I was young, that there is what I would say is a decreasing lack of respect for authority and adults within the school system. Something very sad that we spoke about actually is that within her culture in Colombia. So Christina actually is one of three. She had another sister who, unfortunately, due to the healthcare system in Colombia, did not survive a sickness, a flu. She was her sister that was very close in age to her and was in elementary school at the time, her little sister, and she passed away from complications from the flu. It's one of the reasons Christine actually chose to immigrate to America, is she was having some health problems of her own and didn't feel that she could get adequate access to healthcare in Colombia. And furthermore, she actually had larger aspirations for education as well. And in her area of Colombia, she reports that many women would be limited to the careers they had because of the class that she grew up in. She says that it was common for women to have to work, but they did not have the freedom to really go into any field that they wanted the way that men in the area did. She says it's not the case for all of Colombia. It's very much impacted on what area you live in and what class you are in, what your financial standing is within your community. But she said in her area, being a poorer area, that she essentially would have had to go into some form of childcare, or she didn't stay a nurse's aide at the hospital, or a restaurant worker. And so she said that two of the reasons she wanted to come here was for healthcare and for educational opportunities, both of which she has thankfully been able to access and benefit from, which she's extremely grateful for, and I'm extremely grateful that she's had those opportunities. It's definitely eye-opening to think about, that there's still that big difference and such that gap in the world where, something that we take such for granted here, like the flu, that's not, my whole family has had the flu very, very recently, in fact. And even my 1-year-old daughter will, of course, worry about the seriousness of the flu. It was not something that I was in panic over, like, oh my goodness, this could be fatal. It's something that's so routine and common, and I have full faith that our healthcare system will be able to help and handle that. And, I think it's also eye-opening, considering healthcare is certainly a very controversial topic in our country at this time, and for good reason. And we have a lot of there's a lot of criticism of the American healthcare system, and rightfully so, but they're still, in comparison to other countries and other people's experiences, there's still something to be very much grateful for. And same goes for the education system. The fact that, it is not equal opportunity the way it is here. There are cultural roadblocks or obstacles that Christina reported that make you very grateful for your experience here, where even though gender equality is not quite where we would all like it to be, it is significantly better than many parts of the world. And the fact that being a woman in education, being a woman just trying to receive an education, can have such an impact on your options is very sad and very, very upsetting to hear. And while, I'm so grateful that Christina was able to come here to access that, there's a huge toll which that takes, which is being away from her family. She grew up in a very tight-knit family. Their family is extremely close, especially after the loss of her sister. And the fact that she had to choose between having a career and having an education that she wanted and that she could feel proud of, or being near her family, is certainly an upsetting reality to let sink in. So I think that, upon hearing this, I was forced to really look at I was forced to really look at what my personal beliefs are surrounding this. And obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, my personal beliefs are that regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of economic level in a perfect world, economic status in a perfect world, regardless of ability, disability or ability. Everyone should have access to reach their fullest potential in the area that they would like to. And that's something that I feel very passionate about. It's the reason why I'm entering into special education. It's something that my son also reinforces. And, I was very grateful to have grown up in a town that had, and in a time where I had peers and friends that had disabilities. My son having Down syndrome, when I found out he had Down syndrome, I was 12 weeks pregnant, so I found out prenatally through a chronic villus sampling, and I was elated because I had a friend since I was very young. I was 3 or 4, I met Jimmy in my neighborhood, and I grew up knowing Jimmy, and he had Down syndrome, so it wasn't something I was scared of. And when I got to high school, my neighbor had a child with Down syndrome, and she asked me to babysit him. And so that's my Ari, and they're still both very much in my life today. And, because I had that exposure, disability wasn't something that I was ever scared of or shied away from. And, I think that within talking to Christina, it really is amazing how much exposure to people who are different from you can change the way you view things and just really give you that innate empathy for people everywhere and people that are like you or different from you. And something else that impacts my household and my children's upbringing greatly is that my husband and I actually met working in the restaurant business. My husband still is a chef in the restaurant business. And we, within that industry, work with people from all over the world, all different cultures, all different backgrounds, all different ages, men, women. We work with just truly a very diverse population. That's something I'm very grateful for, because from the time that I joined the restaurant business at 16 years old, I was exposed to people that taught me so much about things I wasn't aware of, or some things that I didn't grow up knowing or understanding or experiencing. And I think that it has shaped me as a person, and I think it will continue to shape me as an educator, because I think that going into not only special education, but education in general, you are going to work with both colleagues and students from all different backgrounds. And the more exposure you have to that, and the more understanding you have of people's cultures and people's upbringings, and just a little bit more awareness of how your upbringing impacts you and how someone's upbringing could impact them, the more likely you are to not only be able to support them in their needs, but also the more you're going to be able to learn yourself. So I think that in talking with Christina, I am grateful that I have her as a friend, and that I have her as a colleague, and that I'm able to learn from her experiences and gain insight into what someone who grew up differently than I did sees the world. And, she was really, really great in talking with her and sharing about some very poignant experiences. And I think that kind of vulnerability is admirable. And I'm very, very, very grateful that she allowed me that opportunity. I think, sorry, I'm looking at my notes. I don't think that there's anything else too much that I missed. Something I guess I didn't personally touch on is my areas of discomfort. And just to briefly summarize, I think that my discomfort does come from, right now I think it's a very polarizing time in the United States where people have very opposing views. And I think that I'm guilty of having some very strong opinions and taking very strong stances as well. And something that I do have to sit with as a discomfort is that, I'm going to come across, and I already have come across, colleagues and coworkers and students and families that I work with that do share those opposing beliefs. And, while it's important to understand and respect everybody's beliefs, that I also need to be able to, in some ways, in some instances, it's great to know more and support those beliefs. In other instances, it might be helpful to be able to kind of set those differences aside and make sure that at the end of the day, as an educator, I am just focused on supporting that student in the best way that they need, and to be able to make sure I really take my own personal beliefs out of it. So, yes. So I think that is most of what we talked about. I honestly could probably go on. Christine and I chatted for forever, so I probably could go on for another 20, 30 minutes. But thank you so much for this opportunity. It was a great assignment to not only connect with the class, but also to really learn more about somebody near and dear to me. So thank you. Have a great day.